Super. We have a wonderful group assembled. So we're going to get started. I'm Joanna Cohn, Director of the Institute for Global Tobacco Control at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. And I'm really excited to introduce today's innovation speaker, Mr. Pranay Lal. Pranay is a Senior Technical Advisor for Public Health at the International Union Against Tuberculosis and Lung Disease, based in New Delhi in India. And he is a true Renaissance man. So let me tell you just a couple of things. Pranay did his Bachelor of Science in Microbiology and then went on to do a Master's of Science in Biochemistry. He did a postgraduate diploma in forest management and then went to the UK, to the University of Oxford, to do another Master's of Science. And what some of you may not know is that he's an author of a best-selling book, not on tobacco control, even though he has written a lot of good work in tobacco control, but his best-selling nonfiction book is called Indica, A Deep Natural History of the Indian Subcontinent. And it was published in 2016 and was on the bestseller list on Amazon in 2017, I think for 38 weeks or so. So a really popular book. And so congratulations on that, Pranay, that's fantastic. Pranay has been working in tobacco control though since 2002, so for a couple of decades. And he's been with the union since 2007. He really is deeply knowledgeable about so many issues, and I've learned a lot from him over the years. And I'm excited that today he's going to speak on one of the projects that he's worked on recently, and that is the use of brand stretching and surrogate advertising by major BIDI and smokeless tobacco companies in India. So Pranay, over to you. Thanks so much for joining us this evening for you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Joanna. Thank you everyone at Johns Hopkins. This is a wonderful opportunity. What I'm going to present today is something that was conceived some years ago while having lunch with Joanna and Ryan Kennedy. And it's an idea that we co-evolved. And I think this is going to be one of the exciting projects that we're going to be working on also in the future, because there's so many other research questions that have emanated from the field study that we did a year and a half ago. So without spending more time on talking about the project, let me share the findings from the project. If I could share my screen and get started. So is my screen visible? Is this good?
Yeah, that looks perfect.
Great. I would like to thank my colleague and dear friend, Dr. Shivam Kapoor, who led this research project from the very start. And as Joanna just mentioned, we studied the brand stretching and surrogate advertisements done by major BD and smokeless tobacco companies in India. And what I'm going to do is going to take you very quickly through a journey of how tobacco control has progressed in the recent past, what have been the policy and legislative issues that govern tobacco control in India, and in particular, tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship, and then get into the nitty-gritty of what the study was all about. So I'm just going to give you a very quick snapshot of the tobacco use prevalence in India. India is a very large country. We have nearly 270 million tobacco users in India. And if all of them were to unite and form a country, they would be as large as Indonesia. In India, we have an immense diversity of tobacco products. We not only chew tobacco, we smoke tobacco in various ways, but we also have a liquid form of tobacco, and we also have semi-solid jelly forms of tobacco. So truly very, very diverse kind of tobacco products that are available. Many of them are unlisted, unregistered, produced from places which are not even registered as or even regulated as a place of manufacture. Needless to say, therefore, the tobacco attributable diseases and the mortality is immense. One of the figures that we bring forward is from the million death study done by Prabhat Jha, is that if you were to rework that number from a million, we now know it's at least 1.3 million people who die prematurely in India from tobacco use. The Global Burden of Disease 2020 comes up with a better figure and more robust number and says it estimates about 1.5 million people dying from tobacco use in India. Now, what has been clearly the reason for the proliferation of such a wide variety of tobacco products is because tobacco was made available for cultivation and for production in various ways across the country. And as a result, we have a variety of products and a variety of ways in which it can be manufactured and sold. It was very difficult for a very young democracy in the 1940s and 50s, and even to more recently now, to look at all the tobacco products that are available and that can be put into a tax regime. So there are several tobacco products that do not fall into any regulatory mechanism, whether it's taxation, whether it's product control, or even the manufacturing life cycle of the product. For those of you who don't know what BIDIs are, this is a hand-rolled cigarillo. The leaf is not tobacco. The exterior cover is a forest tree, which the leaf is something that doesn't crackle when it burns. It's very smooth. And it contains a very little amount of tobacco, which is sun-cured tobacco, unlike flue-cured tobacco, which uses a lot of wood. This is something that is made in a vast quantity in India. So the current estimates range from 550 billion to about 750 billion. We know that about 7 to 8 BIDIs are smoked for every cigarette in India. Much of this is untaxed, unregulated, home-based, made by women and children, very oppressive conditions under which the whole process of making BIDIs is done. And it remains a very contentious issue because it's politically untenable to regulate BIDIs. More on this a little later, but I just want to take you through the landscape of the tobacco products that I'm going to be talking about. The second thing that really is very large and pretty unique to the subcontinent, and specifically within regions of India, is the variety of smokeless tobacco formats that we have. We've got something called khaini, which is a dry tobacco, which is eaten with lime, slaked lime, and it's put on your palm, it's grounded with your thumb, and it's put between your lip and your gum. There's guraku, which is a molasses-based, very jelly-like slaked lime and shavings of areca nut. Then there's gul, which is also used. It's again very sweet, but it has no slaked lime, lots of aromatic stuff in it that goes into it. The one that you see at the bottom left of the screen is something called pan, which has a betel nut leaf and a variety of condiments and additives. And this is something that became the precursor for the making of much of the smokeless tobacco, because it's something that was traditionally used in India with or without tobacco. But with the arrival of the packaging technology, they started to produce desiccated forms of what is called pan. And this is something that eventually became something that I'm going to show you in the next slide, called pan masala. And the thing on the right is what is called zarda, is something that is also goes along with the pan. So you have tobacco which is added to the pan to make it into a tobacco laced pan, or you could have pan with condiments but without the tobacco. So you could have various versions of it. Now, there's one more term that I would like to introduce to you. It's and I don't expect you to remember all of them if you're not from the subcontinent. It's called gutka. Now, gutka is basically pan masala. Now, that's another term, but you remember what I spoke about, pan. Now, pan masala is the condiments that are all desiccated and put in a sachet. And if you put processed tobacco into it, then you get something called gutka. So let me just show this to you in a couple of slides. Basically, till 2012, we had gutka rampantly sold, which was pan masala, that is the desiccated mixture of condiments that go with the pan leaf. And with tobacco in it. But 2012, this was ruled that by the Supreme Court, which asked the Ministry of Health, particularly the Food Safety Standards Authority of India, to say that you cannot mix tobacco or nicotine with anything that contains food or something that is purportedly called food. Now, as a result, gutka got banned, and this is how the next thing happened. People started getting pan masala and processed tobacco separately and started to get mixed. So now if you notice, you've got these two colored things that you see. The brown colored thing on that palm that you see is tobacco, and the white material that you see on the right is the pan masala. So basically it started getting sold instead of Maruti Gutka, it is now Maruti Pan Masala and Maruti Zarda or Maruti Tobacco. So what you needed to do is merge these two things, put it on your palm and eat it together. So the whole idea of selling gutka, the convenience of it was removed, but the tobacco industry came up with a solution and they said, we could migrate our product and register ourselves instead of gutka as pan masala and as a tobacco product. And this is where the crisis of surrogate advertising begins in India. I'm just going to take you again to a series of slides that this is one of the major pan masala producers of India called Shikhar. Now what they do is they have a variety of other products. So there's one called Pradhan Harpal, which is incidentally produced by the same company, because we know this from the advertisement, the address that is there at the bottom of this brand packaging. What we also see is that there's a Harpal Gutka, which was owned by Shikhar. So you notice that for every pan masala, there is also a gutka. There is also filter khaini. Now, if you notice, there's a fine print on top which says warning. The product is not a safe alternative to cigarettes. Now, what they are trying to say is they're using the word filter to say that like filters protect you from the negative effects of smoke, filter khaini will protect you or offer you some kind of protection from the harms of the chemicals that leach out while you chew the cud of tobacco. So, this is the false sense of security that the tobacco industry gives even to people who chew tobacco. So the same idea as, if you recall, in the 50s and 60s and 70s of using filters in the West. There are other brands of Shikhar that produce pure tobacco, which is khaini, not just filter khaini, but khaini also. And then there is Shikhar Gutka in tin. There's Shikhar Gutka, which is produced even today by the company, though not for Indian consumption, for markets in India. It's only meant for export, but it's incidentally, if you look at the top left, it says ₹2. So if they are exporting it, why do you have to show ₹2? That's a question that people need to ask. And of course, there's different strengths. So like beer, you have hard, more alcohol beer or whatever, the strengths of beers and wines. You have Gutka, which has a number. So it's Gutka 1000, which is very, very strong, higher potency of tobacco. I'm now going to take you to this point that I had made earlier, the 2012 ban on by the Food Safety Standards Authority of India, which said that pan masala can no longer be mixed with tobacco to make gutka. Now, the point here being that while this was banned, pan masala, because it was registered as food, was under no obligations to stop advertising, because advertisement of food of any kind is permissible. So there was a natural switch, which these companies that made gutka and pan masala and many other tobacco products or products that border between being food and tobacco were able to leverage this concession. 2 states realized this and came up with special orders saying that we not only ban gutka, but also ban pan masala, flavored smokeless tobacco, and many other forms in which it comes, like, for example, tobacco and spices, which are used by consumers, and also single-use packets. So there was a very good presentation that was made by, I think, Mark Yakubeli and Sejal Shah and others on the twin use problem in India. I think it was done about 2 years ago. And I think the TPACS has a very, very good collection of these. So I would urge anybody who's interested in to understanding this phenomena to look at it. I'm just going to go quickly into the what does the policy and what does the regulation landscape have to say about tobacco uh, advertising, promotion, and sponsorship. Now, the primary act which regulates tobacco products is simply called COTPA, the Cigarettes and Other Tobacco Products Act. It's a short name. If you look at the name of the act is below the full name. Excuse me. Now, what is important is to notice that the preamble makes it amply clear that there is restriction for concerted action to eliminate direct and indirect. So the section 2 of the act says very clearly that the government of India is supposed to take control of the tobacco industry. And section 5 in particular specifies rules under which tobacco advertising, promotion, and sponsorship needs to be regulated. You remember I spoke about the preamble where it says very clearly the direct and indirect advertisement needs to be stopped. And section 2 makes it amply clear that the Ministry of Health, which is the primary government agency, could bring the entire tobacco industry under its control. Now, there are two ways to look at COTPA, the primary act. It defines advertisement very clearly. And it says that any notice, circular, and document which is used by making announcements which are made orally, or producing light, or transmitting light, or sound, or smoke, or gas. So it's very clear that any medium in which a product is being promoted is not permissible. It then goes and defines the means of indirect advertisements defined under COTPA. Now, what it clearly says is that you cannot use the name of a brand. You can't market a product that resembles a tobacco product, or uses the brand name or the trademark, or uses its colors or layout, or use of tobacco products or tobacco consumption scenes in any form of media. Now, it's amply clear that you cannot promote tobacco in any way. Unfortunately, the enforcement or the legality is not the primacy of this act, because there are several other confounding acts which supersede this act. I'm going to show you how that happens. But let me just take you very quickly to a market scene of how India would look. For those of you who have not traveled to India, here's a scene. This is a very narrow lane in Chennai. You notice the gentleman whose hand you can see with those blue packets. That's a tobacco product called Cool Lip, which is sold quite openly in Tamil Nadu, although smokeless tobacco is banned there. Just above it, if you notice, there are handkerchiefs. And if you notice left to it, there are batteries. So, and the shop behind it is a chemist. So it's an extremely narrow lane, which possibly can have only 2 or 3 people walking side by side. It's extremely thin, narrow lane. And it's a typical Indian market that could be, which is not, it's only used to travel by feet. The other way of selling tobacco, it's getting increasingly rare, but still available, is that people go on cycle rickshaws or hand carts or any other means of mobility. If you read that carefully, and this is taken from a car, it says very clearly that, Navy Cut and Will's Flake are cigarettes. But, you could actually see rickshaws like these cycle men who navigate and, snake through traffic and try selling their wares while there is a traffic jam, because urban areas, as you know, are clogged with cars and people are waiting to buy cigarettes from them at a throwaway price. You notice this is a barber, but he has a tobacco advertisement board on top. And here's a fast food joint and a milk parlor with, again, a cigarette brand as a board. So there is tobacco advertising everywhere. And therefore, it is not difficult for you to see advertisements or tobacco marketing or promotion being accessible to at least a quarter of Indians. This is according to Global Adult Tobacco Survey 2016-17. Now, I just want to take you to another product, which is called Mirage, which is produced from a place called Nathdwara near Udaipur. Please notice the font and the colors, because that's what is important. Now, the same product in another color packaging, but the font in Hindi is very similar. It tends to reduce as it goes towards the last letter. And then it changes the spelling, but again, the colors are the same. The gentleman's photograph is the same. You see a soap that is made by this company now. And this is a match being played in Canada, where they are selling parathas. Parathas are something that Indians, it's an unleavened bread made in an open oven. And so they're exporting parathas made in India to Canada, and I'm sure to the rest of the world. So this brand uses this name for many, many other things. Several attempts have been made to curb surrogate advertisement through a dedicated policy, but somehow did not find the passage in the parliament. There are also specific rules that came out by individual states and municipal corporations. I just want to show you this. Municipal corporations, urban bodies have powers to ban all advertisements which show drugs, alcohol, cigarettes, and tobacco products, or anything that is banned in any other law, or something that can convince the municipal commissioner to ban. So there is within the power for any urban body to come up with laws like to ban point of sale or oversized hoardings which show tobacco advertisements. Now we know states have banned smokeless tobacco and pan masala advertisements. These are those states that have come up with comprehensive plans, and they have policies which ban these. Unfortunately, the ones in blues are the only ones that have banned not advertisement alone, but the product itself. We've analyzed 3 of these states, Kerala, Tamil Nadu, and Maharashtra, and we found that not only were advertisements present, but also the product. So here's the study. What did we aim to do? We wanted to measure the extent, type, and nature of TAP's violation by the smokeless tobacco products and by BIDIs. We also wanted to basically look at how do we map the major BIDI and SNT brands? Where are they prevalent? Can we see where the major brands are dispersed? Can we also see which of these BIDI and SLT brands use their brand logos and colors and stretch their brands and look at other ways of selling other wares by using the same colors and logos? And more importantly, when we were collecting these brands, can we look at their manufacturing details? Because this has become compulsory from 2017, ever since the new excise regime has come in. Now, we started our work. It's taken about 1.5 years to complete the full study, but for a very good reason, because we were covering 11 states and 99 sites. The names of the states are mentioned in phase 2. We used the TPACs that was developed by Johns Hopkins. And based on this, we invited our state research partners to Chandigarh in December 2018 to develop a modified TPACs model and identified the cities and states and preliminary names of markets where the research could be done. We developed an Android app called Just Tabs. Now I've highlighted the name. It's coined by my friend Shivam Kapoor, who was actually the union project manager. He was also looking at how the tab was being used, the app was being used as it was being deployed. So he was the person looking at the union admin panel. Now, the admin panel by itself is using the data to monitor and view all the transacts as they happen. Now, we did a second training workshop where the app was being used to train the state investigators. And we developed a manual for how the packs would be collected and what would be the photography code book, protocol and the code book. Now, this is exactly as TPACs had done. We did minor modification because the methodology of collection was slightly different. Our phase for data collection and data entry was between December 2019 and March 2020, just before the pandemic set in. Now, this was the study area, and you would notice that the Himalayan region and the Northeast is largely ignored. And it may appear to you that a central part of the country is also not covered. Now, while that may be true, if you were to look at the GATS segregation of states, we have covered 9 of the 12 biggest states in terms of absolute tobacco use. We've also covered all the major states based on the criteria of which the zones were designed in the GATT survey. So we've covered just about every zone, the major states in every zone. So in that sense, we have done justice in the allocation of the states. I just want to take you to the process of how the mapping of vends was done, because once we found out that we wanted to go and identify markets where point of sale violations or product display violation or non-point of sale hoardings or boards were available. So these are the kind of things that we were looking for, and we wanted to procure the products that were being sold in a particular market in every city. So we wanted to actually look at 3 socioeconomic status or 3 socioeconomic strata zones in each city. One very rich place, one medium income area, and one poor market, a market where the poor people would be residing. It's something like that. We also wanted to identify what were the peak days. There would be some days when the markets are shut, or some times when the markets don't open or don't close, or those kind of things. So we wanted to be very sure that we are going at the peak of the business hours. We asked our partners to do a preliminary transact analysis before the Just tab was developed, so that they have a sense of what a typical market looks like. So they didn't go to all the 3 cities where they were supposed to do the study. So in each of the 11 states, basically, our partners were supposed to study 3 cities, and within the 3 cities, 3 socioeconomic markets. Like I said, a high socioeconomic status market, a medium, and a low. Now, what we wanted them to do is get a sense to see what are the potential sites and the possible sites where tobacco could be sold. So there could be one which are very obvious, where you have overt display of tobacco products that are being put up, and there are large and small vends that are available where only tobacco is being sold. They could be exclusive, they could be mixed, there could be provision stores where tobacco is also sold, just like the 7-Elevens in America. So, where you have a display, a power wall of tobacco products behind you. So a lot of provision stores in India are like that as well. And there would be some which are unregistered and mobile, the kind of ones that I showed you. So the transact should basically cover the market in such a way that it gets the entire sense of how many products are available at any given site. So just to give you some screenshot of Just Tabs, this is the opening scene, the state of Uttar Pradesh, the city of Lucknow. SES2 means medium. And this is where one of our investigators starts. This is a market that he or she would be walking towards. And as they approach the first vendor, which they have identified from where they would be collecting the products, they start taking photographs. Either they collect the the products and photograph them later, or they could, if they feel it amenable to the conditions, because it can be hostile where you're buying these things and taking photographs, it has to be done with some sensitivity. And therefore, they could as well take a recyclable bag, a biodegradable bag, in which they put all the material, put a slip, and say they have all the details from where they got the material, the products, and they pack it and take it along with that. So this window that you're seeing, this is something that they could do on the site, or they could come back to the office and fill it up. Now, in the union office, my friend Shivam Kapoor would be sitting and watching all these people as they embarked on their journey in the markets. He would know exactly who's traveling at what pace and at what time. So he would be on top of understanding if all the investigators, if they have commenced their study, he would know exactly how they're walking, and if they're stopped, if they're buying some material. All those things were being fed into the dashboard, and he was aware of the, the, the developments as they were happening. If there were any challenges, he was there at the beck and call, and they could call and share their anxieties or the challenges that they were facing, and he would be there to solve them. So and this is one way in which we could harmonize the inter-investigator biases that would be creeping in, because you've got somebody who is actually watching you real time. Now, this is a typical transact. This is, I think, from Calcutta. And so it starts for 3 kilometers, and on both sides of the market, the vends are seen, photographed, and then they choose the 3 vends: one very large vend, one medium mixed vend, and one small mobile vend or something which is very, very tiny. So we get a flavor of picking up products that are sold in 3 or 4 different kind of vends. Indian markets are not like any other. I mean, they're chaotic, they can be difficult, and they have no plan, and some of them. So we, for our training purpose, we asked all our state partners to come up with transact plans, and we helped them decide on how to choose direction and flow and collection of the data. So we asked them to take images on both sides of the transacts, wherever they saw shops or vends or potential vends which may not have the POS but still be selling tobacco products. We wanted them to look at geotagging, and as they took pictures, which would have lat longs and also have timestamps, which will have the date and time of every image that they took. This is the protocol, again, very similar to what TPACs have developed. We've looked at, like I mentioned, exclusive vends, mixed vends, provisional stores, unregistered kiosks, mobile vends, everything else. And what we wanted to look at was also look at the diversity of products. Now, the images that I showed you earlier are the kind of ones that we were looking for. And this is only a line list of what we were looking for. Now, the team of investigators, like I mentioned, would take a non-plastic biodegradable bag. They would make a slip in which an inventory form on which they would write the details of the vendor and write the time, and they would have all the details that were needed. It would be stapled to the bag, and there would be a picture of the counterfoil taken so that there's something that comes to the admin panel, which Shivam would look at, and he would know exactly how many products have been purchased, from which vend it has been taken at what time. Now, once the data was, the products were collected, they were photographed, and they were also listed in the Microsoft Office Excel at the city and state level. Second master sheet was double entered and validated on SPSS in the union office by Shivam once the products had come. So we were doubly validating not only the product, but also the way the entry was done. I'm just going to take one example of how the data was collected and tabulated. So here's an example from Bihar. You would notice there are 3 cities and 3 SES, high, medium, low. We looked at the total number of vends, that is column number 3. We looked at vends that had any tobacco product violation. So we looked at, say, 34 vends, and 29 of them had product violations, tobacco product violations. And we looked at the vends with SLT violations, so how many of them were SLT and how many of them were BIDI. And we noticed that primarily this was a violation of SLT products. Very few of them actually vends had any BIDI violations, and all the display was largely of SLT products. I'm going to show you the next table, which again looks at the same number of vends. In the same vends, what did we notice in terms of surrogate advertisements? And we look at how many vends of these have surrogate advertisements for any tobacco products, vends that had surrogate advertisements for SLT and for BIDI. So BIDI, we did not find any. And if you notice, there was the highest, of course, was for SLT. Just to further tease out that data that we collected from in terms of products that were being sold, you'd notice that the number of BD brands are very, very few. Very strange, given that Bihar has a significantly high volume of, high number of BD smoking. But SLT, of course, is a predominant tobacco form of use. You notice that twin pack, the second thing that I showed you, the pack that you can tear and add to pan masala, both of these had been under scrutiny, and they had found that pan masala also had a tinge of nicotine. And the state therefore had banned pan masala, and therefore naturally the twin pack also was banned. So as a result, there was no pan masala or twin pack available. What we found were packets of khaini, which is the raw form of tobacco with slake lime, and other forms of tobacco. And there was no gutka, which was a good sign that assures us that there is, the 2012 order was being maintained. Surrogate advertisement, as you see on the extreme right, is comparatively quite high. I'm just going to go now very quickly to the unique observation that we made, our teams made. I'm just going to take one or two from each state. There were several, because each state and city had some unique form of things. In Bihar, despite a ban on pan masala and other forms of SLT, especially twin packs, the surrogate advertisement in terms of large hoardings was pretty prominent, and in prominent places, especially around markets and bazaars. In Gujarat, people like to try novel things, and it was no surprise that we found novel smokeless tobacco and pan masala products, especially lots of bags and pan masala products of new kinds. So whatever you find in the rest of India, you're sure to find it, if it is of high quality, to find it in Gujarat. In Haryana, our investigators found that most tobacco vends are unregistered kiosks, and hawkers sell their wares in movable vehicles. In Maharashtra and Karnataka, it was very, very strange that they found a tin of dentifrice. Now, dentifrice with tobacco is actually banned under the Drug and Cosmetics Act. So it was very strange that a product like this was found in the state. The other thing was noticed in Kerala, that although there were no exclusive tobacco vends, now this is very strange for Kerala, because the state has pretty good tobacco vendor licensing policies in place, but there were no tobacco vendor licensing, exclusive tobacco vends in the state. Also, the sale of nicotine gum was over the counter and through points of sale where tobacco was happening. So it's a very strange thing to notice that you have tobacco gum sale in places where tobacco vends, through tobacco vends. Punjab, again, like Haryana, small unregistered kiosks, mostly run by women in low SES area. These were the prominent things that were noticed in Punjab. In Tamil Nadu, despite a comprehensive smokeless tobacco ban, there was sale and very easy access to smokeless tobacco products. Although taps of any kind were not observed. And in Chennai, there were no taps of any kind, whether it was for BIDI, cigarettes, or tobacco, smokeless tobacco. So that was a very unique thing to be found in the state of Tamil Nadu. In West Bengal, quite like many other parts of Eastern India, you find a significant trademark infringement because local products tend to mimic prominent local national brands. So they would be local names, but the colors and everything would be exactly like that of a leading smokeless tobacco brand. And there is a lot of smokeless tobacco advertisement on state buses. Now, just to come to unique observations that were made for BDs. Now, BD violations in terms of taps, especially hoardings, were insignificant. I mean, they were very, very rarely reported by any state or city. In particular, no BD-related taps were seen in Haryana, Jharkhand, Punjab, and Uttar Pradesh, very, very interestingly. In Karnataka and Maharashtra, they found something that violates the sensitivities and sensibilities of the local population, which is the fact that they show Hindu gods and deities, or even children, as in West Bengal. And in Kerala, they have a BD by the name of the main festival of the state. I'm just going to take you through what we saw in terms of SLT. What was very typical about SLT was that product display was the most common type of TAPS violation. And in very, very few places, posters, dangle stickers, or leaflets were observed. But again, minuscule in terms of the number of TAPS violations in terms of product display. They were upfront, like the images that I showed you. Now, Tamil Nadu is the only state to be tax free in terms of no display of uh, of hoardings or any form of upfront, except for product display. There was no form of tax violation. Now, there were some exceptions to the rules. There were tax-free low socioeconomic zones in Surat, very strange. Aurangabad, there was also in Gurugram, strangely, there was no smokeless SLT-based taps seen in any of these places, and Mohali as well, in high SES zones. Uttar Pradesh is the only state where SLT display was nearly 100%. And just about every vendor was showing SLT both in terms of product and in terms of its TAPS violation. So, and Karnataka also had rampant TAPS violation. That means there was a board behind or on the top, or some dangles or any other form that was present in the shop, whether like Uttar Pradesh. Something very interesting, and I think it's been done for the first time in India, is that how many vendors exist, how many points of sale exist, and how many non point of sale taps hoardings can be observed. You remember the image that I showed you of a barber and a fast food joint with a tobacco advertisement? This is exactly what we wanted to see. So, for example, the vendor density per kilometer, point of sale in West Bengal is very, very high. You find 19 points of sale per kilometer. So basically what this means is that every 50 meters, you have 1 point of sale, right? So that's incredible. And what you also see is—
to interrupt, but you have 5 minutes left.
Sure, I'm almost done. Thank you so much. Yeah, okay, I'm almost done. So I just want to highlight here is that the points of sales are very, very important, because not only is there a violation of TAPS, but also the amount of accessibility and the availability of the product becomes amply easy for people in West Bengal and Jharkhand and states like Jharkhand and Kerala, which are more, very, very impressive in terms of new legislation that they've come up with. So Jharkhand and Kerala therefore have to take note of the number of point of sale vends, the vendor density, and also the non point of sale taps that is pretty high in these states. The other states, of course, there cannot be something which we can say is that this is the ideal number. There can be no ideal number, but it is something to go with, because if you have numbers in front of you, this is something that policymakers would be interested to see. I just want to go very quickly to looking at how many products we found. These are the number of products that were collected from each site. These are not unique products per se. I'm going to show you the next slide where the unique products, where the overlaps of products and other things are seen. Just go quickly to the next slide. Yeah, I just wanted to show you this product, which is in Kerala. As I mentioned earlier, Kerala had banned smokeless tobacco products. And despite that, you have a very, very high rate of, you still have availability of smokeless tobacco products. And you also have surrogate products for the same products, right? And same thing when Maharashtra has banned pan masala and gutka and SLT products, you still have 205, which is among the highest that they have found for other states. And the other thing that I wanted to bring to your notice is that smokeless tobacco product is extremely high even in the state of Tamil Nadu. So what is annoying is that despite the availability of or non-availability of tobacco products, there is a significant amount of tobacco products that are available. I'm just going to go very quickly. This is a slide that I want to show you, remind you that the three objectives that we had, one was to map the major products. We wanted to look at brand stretching, what was available. I think I've delved too much on brand stretching and other TAP violations, and to look at the manufacturing details, because this is something novel and nobody has understood this or at least done it so far. So we thought this was a great opportunity. So we found 218 unique brands of SLT and 129 brands of BDs that were found. And we excluded RYOs and cigarettes because these were purchased by our other brand, have been covered earlier. Just want to show you that the compliance to what is essential data that every product should mention is pathetic. So if you look at the complete manufacturing details, except for some pan masala brands, the rest of them are dismal. I mean, 90% of all products have nothing to show in terms of the products. I just wanted to show you the kind of violations we found, gods and goddesses. The figure, the image, which is second from the left, is something that has actually been highlighted by one of our partners in Maharashtra. And what has happened is that they have raised this thing that if you notice read it very carefully, it's written in Marathi and Hindi, it's called Sambhaji BIDI. Now, Sambhaji was a great emperor of the Marathas. And people objected to this, that, we should no longer use his name. And so they changed it to the manufacturer's name, who's called Sabade. And the name of the BD brand is now Sabade. Now, we found several other gods and goddesses. Their children's names that on which BDs are sold, for example, the one on the bottom left. But we also found for the first time a smokeless tobacco brand with a child's photograph on it. And again, the violations of plastic rules and all of those, I'm not going to go into those details. National symbols, you cannot show Indian flag. Unlike, say, in America, where you can wear a T-shirt or any other thing, we can't do that in India. And it's an affront to our national symbols. So this is called Tiranga, which means tricolor, which is the three colors of the Indian flag. We found other violations, for example, Guru Nanak Dev, and if you notice at the bottom left, this is not from the study itself, but from the internet just now. They're saying Healthy New Year with the vaccine on it. So Shikhar Gutka, the same guys with a mask, they put a mask and they put a vaccine on top of it. Also, an affront to the Sikh community, because the Sikhs don't consume tobacco, but they have used Shikhar Pan Masala and Gutka as something to sell their product. The only BD brand where we saw brand extension is this brand, which is manufactured in Tamil Nadu, but it's sold in Kerala as well. They make balms, they make rice, flour, tea, matchboxes, and everything else. And just very quickly, I know, Carla, you must be hopping mad, but just give me another minute or two. The limitations of the study, I think I've covered some of these. We don't have reliable data on SES, especially when it comes to markets. So we don't have, for example, we don't have an understanding on market rent. So what we decided to do is go with the partners' understanding of local conditions on what they think are high society or high economic zones and medium economic zones and lower economic zones. And the mapping on data was largely done by civil society with or without the support of local enforcement officials, except for in Karnataka, where the state government was the one that conducted the study. Collection of packs is a very difficult thing, because if you're buying a single piece every time, you don't get a receipt. In fact, there is no receipt for tobacco purchase in India, no matter where you buy it. And of course, we tried controlling the inter-investigator reliability or the biases that may creep in, because we knew that they would exist, and they are, of course, based on geographic conditions as well. But we tried reducing this with the admin panel that we had for our application for Just Tabs, which was being monitored by Dr. Shivam Kapoor. My final slide, and I will I'll be open for questions after that. I just want to, what we heard from our partners was that there was lack of clarity, both by the vendors or by the enforcement officials, on what constitutes a violation. And litigations in the past have been a big deterrent for people to actually go hammer and tongs when they see something which is obviously violating COTPA or any other local act. There are multiple agencies. Everybody pushes their responsibility onto the other, because they would say that there is no clear mandate whether they should be the leading organization to do this. Also, there is very little clear precedence. So even if it were to escalate and go to the court would need a lot of support to bring this up in a way that would support and encourage local enforcement officials to go on further to continue enforcement. Manufacturers usually are based in other cities or other states, and therefore it is very difficult to actually find the real perpetrator. I think the problem is largely at the national level because there is no clear guideline and there's very little that the central agencies have themselves done in terms of taking action for reducing the prevalence of surrogate advertising or any such thing. There is also very little in terms of what Ministry of Health has done to reduce tobacco advertising promotion and sponsorship at the national level, or even taking it down to the state level, because they have to coordinate with very, very powerful ministries so that they can get effective action. And that's something that is missing. And I think the crux of the problem is that the Trademark Act currently prevails over tobacco control legislation because the Trademark Act permits the migration of products from one class to another. So if you are registered as a tobacco product, you could register yourself as a milk or a biscuit or a toffee or a bottled water. And it actually encourages you to do that because it helps you consolidate your brand. We should actually actively talk about sin products not being able to do that because that is something that is not desirable. But this is something for a longer debate, and I think I'm happy to talk about, take questions now. And I just want to thank Professor Joanna Cohen, Ryan Kennedy, and Sejal Saraf because they were the people who saw merit in doing the study. I would like to thank all the partners of the union because they have been instrumental in taking this forward and doing the study on the ground. This study benefited a lot from Mr. Ranjit Singh, his understanding of legal issues, especially nitty-gritties of the law. Dr. Shivam Kapoor, Dr. Rana, and Shri Ashish Pandeyji from the union for their constant support guidance, our app developer, and of course the union finance team and also the team at Johns Hopkins. Again, thank you so much for your trust, and I hope we are going to be writing some interesting research papers that will inform and bring about some change in policy making. Thank you so much, and if there are any questions, I'll be happy to answer.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Pranay. That's fantastic. Definitely, you covered a lot of ground, both geographically and substantively. And one of the things that really came through to me was the how much variation there is from state to state. And do you have a sense of whether that has to do with the BIDI and smokeless industries located in those states and the amount of production and manufacturing, or is it more politics, or is it more just the types, the characteristics of the people living there and sort of the local culture in the state? Do you have a sense of why there's so much variation?
There can be no single answer. I think it's got to be a mix of all the three things that you just said. It's got to be socioeconomics, it's a bit of politics and consumer choice. And of course, whether the state produces BDs or smokeless tobacco. We noticed that smokeless tobacco production is largely concentrated in the north. There's very little production of smokeless tobacco products outside of the North Belt. Very, very little. A little bit in Maharashtra, a little bit in Gujarat. BD is also largely, 85% of it is largely in five states of India. There is no clear understanding of whether there is strong consumer choice within BD because a town or a village that makes BDs sells the BD to several other brands, and those brands could be based in different locations. They could be based in Karnataka, Kerala, Odisha, Bengal, Bihar, anywhere. So it could be packaged in any other form and sold as a single brand type and gets sold. There is no unique selling proposition for BD per se. However, when it comes to smokeless tobacco, it's a very strongly, it's quite kind of like cigarette, that there is very strong choice and brand classification and consumer preference that comes into play. And I think there's also a price issue and there's a status issue. All of those need to be studied very carefully, and something that we have not done so far.
That's great, thanks. We do have a question from Vasant Kumar Mysora Math, who congratulates you on a great presentation. And you know, he's asking, going a bit beyond the presentation itself, but asking the big question of, you know, given, you know, that we have COVID-19 and the tobacco industry is continuing to show improved profits. Why is this? Why are they still making money and still doing well?
It's a good question. I think ITC has not shown, the Indian Tobacco Company has not shown significant decline in their profits, nor has the smokeless tobacco industry. At least 3 of them put their profit and loss statements every March, or at least the quarterly statements also. They have not shown decline. I think there are 2 reasons for it. One, the supply chain that they maintain is very robust and they have very good inventories. And they were prepared for shocks like these. So if you notice, even in flood-prone areas, if you don't get medicine, you will surely get gutka. So you are, you know, so that's one thing. So the inventories are prepared for just about every shock that you can imagine. The second thing that happened is that we also noticed that tobacco products were being sold illicitly by legal producers, and for which the Department of Excise came up with a very stern notification saying that tobacco does not fall under essential goods. So please refrain from selling products that are made by tobacco companies or tobacco products themselves. So we have seen a lot of seizure happening, but seizure is perhaps only 5 or 10%. So 90% of still percolates into markets. And of course, direct to home marketing has also happened. If you notice, internet sales have shot up in India for tobacco products. So I think there's a lot of very nefarious ways in which the tobacco industry has started operating. And I think this is where we have to start working and trying to seal those new channels that have been created by the government of by the tobacco industry in circumventing government rules. So I think we have to stay vigilant as researchers, as civil society, as advocates.
Great, thanks. And I'm just going to ask you for a very quick, like 20-second response to the final question. What do you see as the future directions for this work? What do you think is the next priority?
I think we found some very, very interesting thoughts and ideas. For example, vendor density. It was a unseen benefit, but it's an immense story. I think that's something that we need to play on, because vendor licensing is the future if you're looking at an end game of tobacco in India. I think this clearly also shows that tax violation, which we thought was much less in states like Kerala or other states that were doing better, like even Punjab, it's not so, because the tobacco industry has done very, very, made very strong inroads into just about every city and state. So I don't think, we may have GATS results, but that may not be something that we can rest upon. We need to continue our work in terms of advancing tobacco control.
Thank you. Well, unfortunately, we're going to have to end it there. We're at time, but there will be a recording of this lecture on our YouTube channel shortly, so you can share it with your colleagues who weren't able to attend. So just please join me in thanking Pranay Lal for a wonderful presentation and for excellent work from him and his team. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next time.